The early morning sun shimmered over the sleek silver jet parked on a private runway, its polished surface glinting like a diamond against the tarmac. Inside, the cabin was a symphony of luxury: white leather seats, champagne already chilling in crystal flutes, and soft ambient lighting that suggested wealth without needing to scream it. A flight attendant, tailored in a navy blue uniform, moved swiftly down the aisle, checking each detail with the precision of someone used to serving the elite. Her name tag read Angela, and her expression was the sort worn by someone who had seen too many self-important clients, but knew better than to let it show. She was preparing for another private charter, an unnamed VIP, though such anonymity wasn't uncommon in her line of work. As she smoothed a napkin and adjusted a headrest, the door to the cabin creaked open. A woman stepped inside, her presence immediate but not loud. She wore comfortable clothing, soft black leggings, an oversized gray hoodie, and designer sneakers that blended into the rest of the outfit almost too effortlessly. Her locks were pulled back into a bun, and she carried no obvious luggage. Angela turned at the sound of the entry, her brows narrowing slightly at the sight. The woman looked around as though she belonged, as if this was her usual morning commute rather than a rare brush with affluence. Angela's eyes scanned her quickly. No assistant, no bags, no obvious markers of money. The woman met her gaze calmly, offering a polite nod before moving toward one of the wide leather seats. She sat, pulled out her phone, and began scrolling. Angela's heels clicked sharply across the floor as she approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said with a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This flight is private. May I ask how you got on board?" The woman looked up, confusion flitting across her face before settling into patience. "I'm where I need to be," she replied evenly. That answer didn't satisfy Angela. Her training didn't include what to do when a potential stowaway was poised and self-possessed. "I'll have to ask you to leave," Angela pressed, her voice edging toward coldness. "I don't think you understand. This aircraft is not for public access." The woman didn't move. "I understand perfectly," she said, setting her phone down. Angela felt something twist in her stomach, irritation mixing with indignation. The audacity, the entitlement. She took a step closer. "Security has already been called," she lied. "You have no right to be here." Still, the woman didn't flinch. She folded her hands in her lap and looked past Angela toward the open door of the cockpit. Something in her posture said she wasn't intimidated. Angela didn't like it. Her mouth tightened, and without fully realizing what she was doing, she reached out and slapped the woman across the face, not hard enough to bruise, but sharp enough to command attention. The sound cracked through the cabin like a whip. Silence followed. Even the air seemed to freeze. The woman blinked once, slowly. She didn't touch her face or stand. She didn't shout or retaliate. Instead, she picked up her phone, pressed a single button, and raised it to her ear. "Yes," she said quietly, "we're going to need to deal with something before takeoff." Her voice was calm, every syllable dipped in cool authority. Angela stepped back, suddenly unsure. Something shifted in the air. A ripple of uncertainty flickered across her face, though she tried to hide it. From the corner of the cabin, a junior flight attendant who had watched the scene unfold took a silent step backward. As if wanting to disappear into the floor, the woman ended the call without another word, setting the phone down once more. Angela opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to scold again, but she was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. The pilot, a seasoned man with silver at his temples and a permanent look of calm, entered the cabin, his face drained of color. His eyes scanned the room, landing on the woman seated, unbothered, and then flicking to Angela, whose spine straightened. He swallowed hard, then addressed the woman in a voice stripped of all pretense. Angela stood stiffly beside the woman she'd just struck, her mind racing to make sense of what had just unfolded. Every instinct told her she was in control. This was a private jet, after all, and the woman didn't look like any client Angela had ever served. No jewelry except a simple gold band on one hand, no designer handbag draped over her arm, no security entourage trailing behind. She didn't even ask for champagne. She just sat there, unbothered, scrolling through her phone as if she owned the sky. And that's what Angela couldn't wrap her head around. The woman's demeanor didn't align with the usual high-profile passengers she served. Those people made a point to be noticed. They dropped names and signed receipts with $500 tips. They wore sunglasses indoors and demanded their favorite brand of still water, flown in from some mountain spring in the Alps. This woman had arrived quietly, said little, and moved with the kind of ease that looked like confidence but felt, to Angela, more like arrogance. Or maybe that's what she told herself to justify her reaction. The truth, buried somewhere behind Angela's thoughts, was more uncomfortable. She had made a snap judgment. It was the way the woman dressed, the casual hoodie, the sneakers with scuffed soles, the fact that she was black. A whisper of doubt passed through Angela's mind now, a flicker of guilt she refused to name. But it wasn't just her. The other staff on board had reacted the same way. The co-pilot had looked puzzled when he passed the woman earlier. The ground crew had exchanged glances when she boarded. No one questioned the assumption that she didn't belong. Not once. Angela had prided herself on professionalism, on knowing how to read people, but now, under the dim overhead lights of the jet, everything about her felt exposed. The silence around her seemed louder now. She glanced over her shoulder at the junior flight attendant again, who quickly looked away, pretending to check inventory. The woman hadn't moved since the call. She wasn't demanding anyone be fired or shouting about lawsuits. She just waited, and that was somehow worse. The memory of her own words echoed in Angela's ears. "You have no right to be here." It had felt right at the time, like she was protecting the sanctity of luxury from intrusion. But now, in the wake of the pilot's sudden entrance and his ashen face, Angela was starting to understand that maybe this wasn't a trespasser at all. Maybe it was something else. Something she couldn't undo with an apology or a tray of refreshments outside the jet. The last of the loading crew was clearing away. The door remained open, the early breeze drifting through, cool and indifferent. Angela looked at the woman again, searching for some crack in her calm, some reaction that might offer a clue about what was coming next. But the woman offered none. She simply sat there as if the entire cabin, the entire aircraft, existed at her discretion. Her silence said more than words ever could. The pilot moved forward slowly, his voice low, almost reverent as he addressed her. His expression was a blend of recognition and remorse, like someone realizing too late that they had walked straight into a mistake of significance. Angela watched his posture shift, the way he stood a little straighter, hands behind his back, like a man in the presence of someone who outranked him not just in title, but in power. The way he addressed her, no commands, no questions, just acknowledgement, made Angela's chest tighten all at once. The pieces began to slide into place, though not fast enough to save face. Angela felt her authority drain away, replaced with something else entirely, fear, shame, maybe both. It was dawning on her now that the woman wasn't some overconfident intruder trying to sneak into luxury. She was someone the crew should have known, someone the ground staff should have been briefed about. Someone whose presence didn't require validation by clothes or attitude. Someone who could change the course of careers with a word, and none of that had mattered in the moment when Angela had decided who the woman was based solely on appearance. There had been no attempt to verify identity, no protocol followed, just a gut assumption that spiraled into an action now impossible to take back. And yet, through it all, the woman had shown more restraint than Angela ever had. More composure, more control. She didn't have to raise her voice, she didn't have to explain herself, because she knew exactly who she was, and soon everyone else would too. The cabin remained tense, as if the air itself recognized the weight of what had just happened. The woman sat still, hands gently folded in her lap, the faint red mark on her cheek the only visible evidence of the violence she'd endured minutes before. It should have provoked chaos. A raised voice demands some kind of outburst. Instead, her silence was louder than any confrontation could have been. It was deliberate, powerful, and deeply unsettling to those around her, who now realized the truth they'd missed. Angela stood a few steps away, still processing, still trapped in her own disbelief, her eyes fixed on the floor. The junior attendant, Rachel, hovered by the galley, pretending to organize silverware trays. She hadn't moved since witnessing the slap. She had seen everything: the moment the woman boarded, the way Angela had confronted her, and how quickly assumptions took the place of facts, and she'd said nothing. She hadn't intervened, hadn't even questioned it. Not when the woman was accused of trespassing, not when Angela's hand struck her across the face. Rachel told herself she was just following the lead of senior staff. She told herself she didn't want to cause drama, but now, watching the way the captain addressed the woman with near reverence, she felt that same burning guilt rise in her throat. She'd judged her too. They all had across the aisle. Two catering staff, who had just finished restocking the refreshment area, stood frozen, unsure whether to retreat or make themselves invisible. They avoided eye contact with the woman, unsure what expression to wear. Neither of them had spoken a word when the incident occurred. They were used to being background noise, shadows moving in and out before the flight even began, but even they felt the shift in energy when the woman's identity became apparent. They remembered now. There had been a note in the digital manifest about an unnamed owner of the jet. It was vague, just a line item: owner to board directly, no delays, no names, no security detail. Just the quiet instruction. They hadn't thought much of it, and now that oversight felt colossal. Even the co-pilot, who had just exited the cockpit to check on the commotion, hesitated when he took in the scene. His eyes darted between Angela, the captain, and the woman in the hoodie. He too had seen her board and had raised a brow to Angela at the time. She'd waved him off, gave him that tight little nod that said she had things under control. He hadn't questioned it further. He hadn't thought it was his place. But now he watched the captain's stiff posture and the look of controlled panic behind his composed face, and he realized it had been his place after all. No one had spoken up for the woman. Not one of them had stepped forward when it would have counted, and now they were all watching the consequences of that silence unfold in real time. The luxury around them, leather, gold fixtures, chilled drinks, suddenly felt sterile, like props in a show none of them understood. The illusion of authority that Angela had leaned on was gone. The hierarchy had inverted in seconds, and it was clear the true power in the room didn't wear a uniform. It sat silently in a window seat, waiting, watching, remembering, and still, the woman said nothing. She hadn't asked for names or demanded apologies. She hadn't cursed or stormed off the jet. Her stillness was unnerving, but more than that, it was purposeful. It left the others to stew in their own awareness, to face themselves, to hear the things they didn't say when it mattered. She didn't need to humiliate anyone. They were doing it on their own. Even now, as Angela finally dared to glance up, hoping maybe for eye contact, maybe for a sign that forgiveness might be possible, the woman didn't meet her gaze. Her eyes stayed focused beyond the window, where the clouds loomed, high and untouched by the noise on the ground. Rachel shifted awkwardly, picking up a napkin she didn't need, unsure whether to say something or disappear entirely. She felt a dull throb in her chest, the regret of cowardice sitting heavy and sharp. She thought about how quickly everyone had made up their minds about who the woman was, how much of it had been based on the color of her skin, how she didn't enter with the forced swagger they were used to. Rachel bit her lip. She hadn't even offered the woman a drink. No one had. No one had treated her like a guest, let alone the owner. They'd all stood silently, complicit in the unspoken belief that she didn't belong. And now that silence filled every corner of the cabin like fog. Thick and unrelenting, the hum of the jet's auxiliary power unit. It filled the silence that had overtaken the cabin, a low mechanical whisper that underscored every second of tension. The woman's phone still rested on the table beside her, face down, though she'd already made the call that changed everything. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't threatened or shouted. She had simply spoken with calm precision, her tone as steady as her posture. It wasn't just how she spoke, it was when she waited until the slap had settled in the air like smoke, until the silence of those around her had wrapped itself into a verdict. Then, without changing expression, she made the call. It was clear she wasn't just calling for help. She was calling to initiate a process. Angela stood nearby, arms rigid at her sides, the burn of realization creeping up her neck like a fever. She had replayed the sound of that slap over and over again in her mind, each time flinching harder, as if the consequences were echoing louder with each memory. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had crossed a line, one she would never have dared to approach had she known who the woman truly was. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She had decided who the woman was before asking a single question, and now the woman didn't need to say anything more. Her silence was surgical. Her phone call had done the work. The crew moved differently now. Every motion was slower, more careful. Rachel tried to offer a bottle of sparkling water at one point, walking down the aisle with trembling hands, but stopped halfway and turned around. The catering staff had long since exited, hurrying off the jet with wide eyes and silent mouths. The co-pilot returned to the cockpit and didn't come out again, his face pale and unreadable when he passed by. Only the captain remained close, hovering with an anxious deference reserved for VIPs so powerful that even a misstep in tone could be a career-ending mistake. He'd already seen the message on his phone, the one confirming the identity of the woman seated in 2A, and he had felt his stomach drop. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't a passenger. She was the owner, not just of the jet, but of the company that operated it. Her name was on documents that these employees had never seen. Her signature-funded bonuses they received annually. Her quiet authority extended beyond the cabin and deep into the systems that paid their salaries and scheduled their flights. That hoodie, those sneakers, the casual ease, it wasn't rebellion against wealth. It was wealth uninterested in being recognized. It was power that didn't need to perform. Angela watched as the woman picked her phone back up. Not to speak again, but to scroll through something as if the chaos around her didn't warrant full attention. It was that effortless calm that unnerved Angela the most. She wanted the woman to yell, to scream, to demand answers, because that would have made things easier. If she had been angry, Angela could have responded with apologies, with regret, with action. But the woman had gone still, and that stillness made everyone else squirm. There was something precise in the way she moved now, not robotic, not guarded, but controlled, like someone who'd been here before, who knew the value of restraint when every eye in the room was waiting for a reaction. It became clear she wasn't surprised by what happened. Disappointed maybe, tired definitely, but not shocked, and that realization hit even harder, because it meant this wasn't new. It meant that even at the highest levels of wealth and ownership, she still had to deal with the assumptions of people who thought they could read her by sight alone. The woman typed a message slowly, her fingers gliding over the screen without rush. Angela couldn't see what it said, but she knew it mattered. Every keystroke felt like a countdown. She wanted to speak, wanted to say something meaningful, something that might soften the irreversible. But no words came. What could she say that would carry any weight now? The woman didn't need explanations. She'd already drawn her conclusions, and it wasn't just about the slap. It was about everything that led up to it. The judgment, the silence, the lack of basic decency from the people who were supposed to serve her. It was all part of the same failure. Rachel lingered by the galley, unsure if she should cry or hide. She glanced at Angela once, then away. No one had defended the woman. No one had even offered a gesture of kindness. And now, watching her calmly interact with the phone again, it was clear this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something they couldn't stop. The power they had ignored was no longer invisible. It had a face, a voice, and most importantly, it had receipts. The door to the cockpit opened again. but this time it wasn't slow or hesitant. The sound was brisk, purposeful, and it cut through the thick tension in the cabin like a blade. The captain stepped out, his hat in his hand, no longer an accessory of authority, but something he now held like a token of apology. His face was pale, eyes darting briefly to Angela, then to Rachel, then finally settling on the woman seated calmly in 2A. He approached with the careful pace of someone walking into a room where every wrong word could cost him more than just embarrassment. He paused 3 steps away and lowered his voice to a near whisper, though everyone in the cabin heard him clearly. "Ma'am, I had no idea this was your aircraft." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The woman looked up slowly, her expression unreadable, the faint mark from the slap still visible under the soft lighting. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She simply stared at the man, her eyes steady and unflinching. Behind the captain, Rachel's lips parted slightly, as if to say something, but she stopped herself. Angela didn't move at all. She couldn't. Her body felt rooted to the floor, her mind spinning through all the steps that led to this moment, and how each one had been a step in the wrong direction. The captain cleared his throat, awkward now under the silence. "We weren't given names," he added, not as an excuse, but as a failed attempt to explain the unexplainable. "There was just a note about the owner being on board. He caught himself, swallowed hard, then looked down at the carpet before finishing. We didn't expect." She raised an eyebrow at that, just slightly, enough to make him wish he'd chosen any other phrasing. The quiet judgment in that one expression said more than any reprimand could. He knew better than to ask for understanding. He'd read her file only moments earlier, after a call from ground control confirmed what they had all missed. Her name carried weight in sectors far beyond aviation. She wasn't just wealthy. She was a figure who owned entire portfolios of transportation companies, logistics firms, aircraft leasing contracts, and more. She'd recently acquired majority stake in the very jet charter service they all worked for. She didn't just sign the checks, they were printed on her terms still. She said nothing. She let the discomfort swell in the room, not out of cruelty, but because she understood the power of silence when everyone else was scrambling to fill it. Angela took a step forward now, finally finding her voice but not the confidence that usually accompanied it. "Ma'am, I didn't know," she began, the words thin and uncertain, "if I'd realized who you were." But she trailed off because even she could hear how hollow that sounded. It wasn't the kind of sentence that could land with dignity. It only proved the point further. The woman turned her head, not fully, but enough to make it clear she was acknowledging Angela for the first time since the slap. Her gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. Angela felt like she was standing in front of a tribunal. No uniform could shield her from what she saw in those eyes, not rage, not vengeance, but something deeper, disappointment so sharp it could carve someone clean in half. Angela wanted to explain herself, wanted to talk about protocol, safety, confusion. But nothing she said could compete with what had already happened, and nothing could justify the fact that respect had only arrived with recognition. The captain shifted again, uncomfortable in the quiet. "We're ready to depart at your discretion," he said gently. The woman finally blinked, turned her attention toward the window, and gave a subtle nod. The message was clear. She was done with the conversation, done entertaining their apologies. Her time and presence were no longer theirs to intrude upon. She picked up her phone again, thumbs scrolling slowly, as if nothing they said or did could interrupt her world now. And she was right. Angela stood frozen, hearing the pilot's words repeat in her mind. "Ma'am, I had no idea this was your aircraft," but now everyone knew. The entire cabin knew. The staff, the flight team, the ground crew, the junior attendants who stayed silent, all of them knew exactly who she was. Not because she demanded attention, not because she flaunted status, but because the truth had a way of revealing itself at the exact moment people wished it wouldn't, and no one would forget that now.